So, Kristin, when you guys were taking care of Matthew, did you find that there were some purchases that you made that were lifesavers, like things that you could not live without or things that you've recommended to people over and over again? Because I feel like I kind of have a list in my head of those things. What about you?
I would definitely say there are things that we learned along the way from our hospice team and just from doing research on our own that helped with Matthew's care, but it wasn't without trial and error for sure. And I love that we can have this conversation today. Molly, it's just you and me today. Jay Dean's on a very well-deserved vacation. And I think we've got some things that I'm hoping will help our listeners, because these are things that we didn't know about, and we either discovered them on our own or we were taught along the way. And I think we can share some insight and hopefully give some people ideas of things maybe that they haven't even thought of. Yeah, let's get into it and talk about some of the things that were really helpful for us when we were doing the physical care for our loved ones.
Okay, so like you said, there was a lot of trial and error for us too. And I found that so many of the things that were designed for the purposes that we needed didn't really work for us. And most of the things that were so helpful were like crazy put together things that I bought that, I don't know, you would have never guessed would help you. So the first thing that comes to my mind is a squirt bottle. So I'm talking about like an old school squirt bottle, like the hairdresser uses for hair dye or whatever, right? I actually had two really specific uses for that. One was for toileting and cleaning Kathy off in the toilet. And then I had another one, a same kind, but just a second one that I used for washing her hair. And I found that using that squirt bottle was way easier and did a much better job and just was a lot more useful for us than a bidet. So we bought a bidet, but it was too tall. It made the seat too high for Kathy to get on. And so it was installed, but I ended up having to uninstall it after trying it out on her. And so I kept a squeeze bottle in the bathroom, and I would fill it up with some lukewarm water, and I would use that as a handheld bidet for her. And it really worked really well.
Yeah, no, that's really a good idea. So, little side note, they, after you have a baby, they give you that for care postnatal, which is a lifesaver. So I can see how that worked really well for Kathy. And just to piggyback off that a little bit. So most of what I'm going to talk about are the things that we used after Matthew had his tonic-clonic seizure and he became non-ambulatory. But the couple things before that were really helpful for us, his mobility was starting to slow down quite a bit before the seizure. And, he was shuffling a lot and his gait was changing, and he was still able to shower with assistance and use the bathroom with assistance. But we made sure that we installed grab bars by the toilet and by the shower. And then we had a shower chair in the shower. So while he was still able to use the toilet, which one of those squirt bottles would have been great. I wish we would have thought about that during that time. The grab bars are really helpful. And where we live in Ohio, our county board will pay for that through the waivers that Matthew was receiving at the time. So I do think that the squirt bottle would have been so helpful when he was still able to use the toilet. And the lukewarm water that's a key.
That's
a key.
Important,
that's a
right?
key.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to gloss over the fact that you said lukewarm. It is really important. You don't want it too hot. You don't want it too cold.
So the funny thing is, I did try those postnatal Perry squeeze bottles for Kathy first, but I found that the squirt bottles, the hair squirt bottles, they were so much thinner that they got like I could use them a lot easier than the thicker, I don't know what you call them, but they're like Perry sprays, right. I think, bottle. They were just a little bit harder for me as a second person, like instead of using it on myself, but as somebody using it on her. It was a lot easier to use that squirt bottle, the angle of it and the long nozzle. And she would often keep her legs together, and I could just poke that thing, between her thighs, and she was kind of none the wiser. And I could just squirt. And it actually ended up being a really good tool for me to have if she had a blowout, like if in her pull-ups, I could just rinse her off in a very targeted way where the water didn't get everywhere. I don't know. For some reason, that for us was like a 50-cent miracle.
Yeah. No, and I love that. And I'm really glad you brought this up because I have friends right now who recently moved their sister into a memory care facility. And I was over there last week and I was helping with the toileting. And that was one of my concerns was, because this is the stuff we just really have to talk about. Like, right. We got to talk about the hygiene, the showering, the cleaning. It's raw, but it's real. And that was one of my concerns was even though she had wipes in the bathroom and was still trying to wipe independently, I kept thinking like, there's got to be an easier way because, and I didn't want to be invasive and help too much, but wanted to make sure she was doing it correctly. I'm going to recommend this to them because this will be a life changer for them, I think, in that. Now, were they just the hair ones? Like, did you get them from the hair supply place?
I got them from Amazon.
Okay.
No, I got them from Amazon and it was like probably, $5 for a bag of 3. I'm making that up, but it was something like that, right? I mean, it was under $10 and I got multiples and I kept them around. Yeah. And I'll explain to you too, how we used it to wash her hair. I had tried everything for wash. Once she wasn't mobile anymore and she couldn't go into the shower and she couldn't get her hair washed. The first thing I tried was bed baths and bed washing her hair. And that just was messy. And I felt like she was stressed out and I wasn't getting her done very well. And I was getting water all over and blah, blah, blah. I had a baby pool and a aquarium pump and a handheld shower thing that I had rigged up. Anyway, what ended up being the easiest and the best and got her clean and made her feel good was this squirt bottle and diapers. So I put a hand towel around her neck and I tucked it into her collar. And then I put incontinence pads. I stuck them all around her, all around the towel. And then I put a huge diaper around her neck. So then I could just go in with the squirt bottle and a towel in my hand and rinse her hair out like this, right? So I had a spray bottle with water that I would spray her hair and get it wet. I'd get a little bit of shampoo and wash her hair. And then I'd take the squeeze bottle with a towel in my hand and I would rinse and catch all the water. Now, it worked on her because she had short hair, but it was such a game changer for us. It took 5 minutes. She stayed dry.
Yeah.
It was over and done with before she knew it.
Yeah, that's great. And we used for Matthew, obviously he had very short hair. What was really good for us, because we tried the same thing when he first came home from rehab and he was in a hospital bed and in his makeshift first floor room that we put together. We were doing the whole thing with the little bedpan and the water and then the sponge and everything would get all over the place. But then our hospice team gave us the shampoo shower caps. Did you ever try those where it's already
I did
now
try
and
those
for,
with
for
her.
those now again for Matthew, being a male with very short hair, that worked really well those were a game changer for his caregivers and for my mom and dad. Because you would just put the little cap on and kind of, move it around.
Yeah, it's a really neat little thing.
Yeah, and take it off and voila, your hair is clean. So for us, those shampoo caps, I'm not sure what you call them, but I'm just calling them shampoo caps.
Yeah, I think that's what they're called.
Right. Those worked really well for us. Going back to the shower for a minute, we also, now again, this was because I don't want to forget this, when Matthew was still ambulatory and we had the shower chair in there that he could sit on because we were worried about his balance and he needed assistance at this point. But we changed out our shower head into a handheld shower because that was huge for us to be able to just take it down. And then, my mom or dad could help rinse him and he could still do it himself at that point. Right. Once he was all lathered up and everything. So that's something to think about too. If you have a regular shower head, and it could be helpful to change it out if they're still able to get in and out of the tub. So, I mean, we were on the verge of having our bathtub converted into a walk-in shower, and that was something our waiver was going to cover. And then, unfortunately, he had the seizure, and we didn't get that far. But that's another thing you could think about too. I mean, see if that's available.
Right. No, it's a great idea, especially if you can get that walk-in shower to be wide enough for it to be like a wheel-in shower, right, for a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Oh, and okay, just going back to the showers though, because this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize in across the board with Alzheimer's so many times, whether I'm talking to friends that have aging parents and are dealing with Alzheimer's or in our group, showers can become a big deal. And our loved ones can really have a fear of showers and water. And what I've been told, and you can chime in, is that sometimes taking a shower feels like poking and like razor blades on the skin, and it has a very weird sensation. And that's why they can fight it and really hate and fear the whole shower thing. We never experienced that, but I know it's a thing.
I know it's a thing too. Thankfully, no, Kathy always loved her showers, which was why it was heartbreaking when I wasn't able to, our shower was up on the second floor. And so it became impossible for her to take a shower when she wasn't able to do the stairs anymore. But yes, you're right. And I've heard from doctors and specialists that showers can be painful and they can feel like knives stabbing you. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Kristin, because we should make sure that people understand that showers are not that big of a deal. Don't force them. If somebody is afraid of them or refusing them, let them refuse. There are other ways to get them clean. It doesn't have to be a shower. We can do bath wipes, right? I don't know if you've had bath wipes, but we had some great ones that felt so good, and you could microwave them so they were warm, and you can get them really clean with those things. So
yeah, that's that.
Don't force it.
I'm glad you said that, because that was on my list too. Was the no rinse bath wipes that you can use, and I go back to one of my top tips where I say, are they safe? Are they clean? Are they comfortable? And being clean doesn't mean giving them a bath every day or a shower. I mean, there are many one of the most relaxing things that Matthew had was his sponge bath. I mean, his caretaker would just fill up the little bedpan nice and warm. And it was really almost like a ritual for them. And she would just give him like the nicest, softest, gentle sponge bath. And that was a really special bonding moment for them too. But they didn't have to be bathed every day. I mean, as long as all the parts and pieces are bathed and he's, clean in that way, right? So there's no infection or anything. Then if you can get them clean or bathed once a week, then fine. That's okay. Don't fight it and don't push them.
Yeah. And speaking of those sponge baths, one thing that I realized, because I'm sure listeners will remember that I have said, and we have laughed about the fact that I tried everything before I made Kathy do anything. And so I would give myself a sponge bath on the bed, on the thing that I would make her lay on, to make sure that it wasn't like sticky or feel bad in some way that I wasn't sure. And I realized quickly.
Did you try the squirt bottle too with the lukewarm water?
Yes.
I love that you did this. I love this.
I did. So I knew exactly how warm it needed to be. But I realized how cold it got, even with warmed up bath wipes. And so I always brought in a little space heater when I gave her sponge bath. And of course I would be sweating, but she's done, and I would need my own bath.
Yeah.
But at least it wasn't awful and feeling bad for her. So
yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you did that and tried all the things ahead of time. And it's really a good idea. I mean, it's kind of a genius idea to do that.
It's hilarious.
But it is funny because I could just picture you trying on pull-ups and diapers and all that.
I did. I tried on all the brands.
Okay, so back to that. I'm just trying to put myself back in the moment of the cleansing and the little things that worked. Another thing that worked really well for us because Matthew was in his hospital bed. Anytime he wasn't in he had a Broda wheelchair, and we'll talk later in another episode about those kinds of big pieces of equipment. We made sure that we had one of those like hospital over the bed tables.
Oh,
Right. An
yeah.
over the bed table, that you kind of wheel underneath and move it.
It's like U-shaped,
Yes.
right?
And
Or
so
C-shaped.
all of his stuff was there. It made it easier for whoever was caring for him at the time, whether it was the living caregiver that we had or my mom or dad or me, and we could put all his stuff on there, and then we could just move it out of the way. And you're not always, because you don't think about this stuff. You're not always like moving things from this shelf to this table or where, I mean, you don't realize how much, if you have a person that is in bed and you're trying to do a lot of their care while they're laying in the bed, you need things at your disposal. And almost kind of like when you're taking care of a baby and they're on the changing table, you can't walk away and go grab something on the other side of the room. So little things like that to consider the logistics of the setup of your supplies, whether it's your skin creams that you're putting on them or the wipes that you're going to need if they're incontinent and you're changing them, or the hairbrush or the Q-tips to clean their ears. I mean, that little table was so helpful for us. So even if your loved one isn't in that specific situation, think about what piece of equipment, or shelf you need nearby that you can easily access all the stuff that you're going to need during a certain care routine.
I think that's so smart because one of the, it's not really equipment, but one of the pieces of supplies that we ended up getting a lot of because they were so useful were those like little plastic bins. And we would double up on especially the changing supplies because Kathy was not bedbound, so she was moving from room to room. But that also meant that she was having accidents in different rooms.
So wait, what do you mean? Like a little Tupperware bin, or what do you mean the plastic?
Yeah, like, there's storage bins.
Oh, yeah,
there's
okay.
little clear storage bins from like the dollar store, right? And just putting we had 2 tubs of Decidin and 2 tubs of whatever. I had a stack of pull-ups in the living room and a stack of pull-ups in the bedroom and.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point there. If you are in multiple places, duplicating supplies in whatever rooms you need, I think that's a great point for sure.
I don't know how long it took me to figure that out.
Right.
But for a while, whenever she would have an accident, I would have to maneuver her back to the bedroom, bathroom area. And finally it dawned on me oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's really stressful and it's unnecessary. And we're both stressed out and trying to hobble with a full pull up and, it's getting everywhere and on the floor and I don't know what. So when I was finally the light bulb went off, it made our life a lot easier.
Right. But these are things that you may not be thinking of them until somebody else mentions it, or you just all of a sudden it comes to you. But you did say something really important that I want to mention when you said, we would both get stressed out. So I noticed that in Matthew's caregiving, if we were stressed, he would be stressed. They can feel your stress and that can easily transfer. And so that was something we were very aware of. And again, like you said, it took until we did that several times where we would be all standing around him and you could hear the stress and the tension in the room or the conversation or what should we do? Or I don't know, just life was happening and we're trying to figure out how to care for him best. And when we realized, sometimes you could just see it in his expression or his brow would furrow. That was another moment for us. Okay, let's make sure that when we are doing things like this for him, we stay calm because he's going to stay calm because there's a lot of fear that just happens in our loved ones that comes out of nowhere because of the disease, right? They're not processing things right. They're not necessarily understanding what's going on. And that also led me to think about just now, as I said that we would always prep Matthew with what we were saying. Okay, Matt, we're going to give you a sponge bath now, and I'm going to take, I've got some warm water. And I mean, not in a very complex way, but just so he knew what was coming. So that was kind of a little side note, but I think it's important to
No, it is
recognize
important.
that.
And because even if you are staying calm, like, at least for me, when we were doing this, it wasn't that I was getting excited
Right.
or anything like that. It's more the urgency when somebody's having an accident, like, oh, get up,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, get up, let's go to the bathroom. And there really was no hurrying her. And so, just because of the process, like the delay in processing and whatnot,
Yep.
stress can come in a lot of different forms. And like you said, Kristen, when I realized that, I thought to myself, like, there's got to be a better way. I can't just keep rushing her and out of nowhere, like this thing. And I am like, oh, we got to get up and go.
Yeah.
When I was asking myself, like, how can I do this better for her? It was like a light bulb. Well, you can just change her on the sofa. Like, there's no rule that says you can't be naked in the living room. Right?
Yeah. Right.
So I made sure that we had chucks, like
Oh, yeah.
lots of
Yep.
lots of chucks so that we could.
Explain what they are, just so, because I mean, we're used to the terminology, but we use those all the time.
Yes. So chucks are the things that you put underneath a body, usually in bed, so that if there's an accident, it absorbs it. And they can be disposable or they can be washable. We had a lot better luck with the washable kind. They were just softer, and I bought way more than you would think you would need. And that actually brings me to my next tip, which was I bought lots of sheets, extra sheets, and it was money so well spent. And I would say the same thing goes for washable chucks if that's what you're planning on using. I bought lots more than I thought I would need because with all the laundry that you're doing, it alleviated some stress for me.
It was a convenience. Yeah. It was probably a
Yes, it was a
convenient tip,
convenience.
yeah.
Totally. That's the right word. Yes. So I bought multiple sets of extra sheets and multiple sizes of the chucks. And I would say the ones that I liked the best were the extra, extra large kind that spread across the bed and were soft. Anyway, that's a tip. It's not a brilliant piece of equipment, but just the idea of buying more so that you don't have to be concerned about doing laundry all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
No,
we were still doing
no, but
laundry
it's
all the
great
time.
though. I mean, I second that. We used the disposable chucks just because we got them delivered on a weekly basis from hospice, and I would definitely go with the extra large ones. But we also had like draw sheets that we used underneath, and
Right.
to help us. And it's just funny that you say that about lots of comfortable sheets. That was one thing that my dad. There were a few things my dad tried out himself, like you. My dad would do some. I mean, we even tried getting in the Hoyer lift and getting in and out and trying the different hospital beds when they delivered, that kind of stuff. But the sheets, it was really important to have soft, comfortable sheets. And we had multiple sets of those. I mean, you don't really think about it, but especially at the point where Matthew was, where he was in a bed.
He's living in bed. Yeah.
Right, when he wasn't in his chair. That was a huge thing. So I'm glad you said that. One thing that was really helpful for us were different positioning pillows. Matthew was in bed a lot when he wasn't. I mean, we tried to have him up in his chair most of the time when we could. But the positioning pillows, the leg pillows to go in between your legs, or we had it was almost like just like an oblong pillow that we would put in between his ankles, because the skin breakdown can happen very quickly. And that was something we were very aware of. And if he was laying in his bed or even sitting in his chair and his ankles would be crossed on top of each other, or your heels are pressing together a lot, it doesn't take much sometimes for skin breakdown to happen. And also with his hips, right? Because his hips, he had arthritis in his hips. And so we would have the leg pillows in between his knees, or a leg pillow, and then one in between his ankles. Or when he was on his side, we would kind of wedge a positioning pillow behind his hip. So if he did roll a little bit, which also helped just for the skincare in general, so that, you're not laying on the same spot for an extended period of time. And, you don't want to develop any bed sores. So for us, using those pillows, and a lot of times we had to try many different, I mean, you know how many Amazon pillows I ordered?
Yes.
It was,
Yes.
we did a lot of trial and error with that. But I would say keep that in mind because you don't realize when you're not ambulatory how much stiffness can happen and how much skin to skin contact can happen. And just making sure that, we're keeping them comfortable and safe.
And what's so impressive, Kristen, is that Matthew was bedbound for how long and never
Three
got
and a half
a bed
years, and
sore?
he never got a bed sore. And we were meticulous about his skincare. So skincare was really important to us because he was bedbound really for 3.5 years and never got a bed sore. We were all very, very careful. One of his live-in caretakers created this potion, so to speak. It was a mixture.
Yes, I heard you had a secret
Yeah,
potion.
it was a mixture of 3 different creams. One, she would mix together like all equal parts. One was a moisture barrier cream. I mean, that's what it's called, moisture barrier cream, mixed with vitamin A and D ointment. It was just A and D ointment in a tube, and she would, squirt a bunch of that in there. And then the other one was, I don't know if I'm saying this right. It was a cameo-septine ointment. And I'm going to spell it just in case anybody wants to write. It's CAIMO-SEPTINE. Cameo septine ointment. And she would make a big tub of it like in the beginning of the week, mix it all together. And something about those 3 creams and ointments together kept his skin impeccable. And every time she would change him, she would wash him very, very thoroughly too. So
Okay, but what's so important is that this is coming from somebody who kept their loved one bed sore free for 3 years. So that's a testament. I tried to find positioning pillows for Aunt Kathy too, and was never able to find one that was small enough for her.
So what did you do? Because I mean, eventually she was in bed quite a bit, or did you just rotate her a lot and reposition her a lot?
I rotated her a lot,
which is the other alternative, right? I mean,
yes, but I like Matthew. Kathy had really bad arthritis in her hips. I mean, really bad, and she couldn't tolerate being on her side, and so her doctor or the nurses, I can't remember who told me, maybe it was the occupational therapist, said even just a slight shift.
Yep.
Even like up and down, it doesn't have, ideally it would be to the side, but anything you can do to reposition them every 2 hours is helpful. And so I would actually check her underwear, and make sure that she wasn't wet every couple hours. And that's when I would like sort of shift her just a smidge and make sure that she was moving around a little bit.
Yeah, and you're right. That's all it does have to be is a little movement. It doesn't have to be the big turn because Matthew could only tolerate one side versus the other for the same reasons. But yeah, and then while we were doing some of the changes and things like that, one of the things that was really helpful for us, and I'll kind of end on this note with what worked for us, we had ordered a fidget blanket because a lot of times, there's anxiety and some restlessness, or some of our loved ones will, they'll start like playing with blankets or holding things. And so I ordered a custom made fidget blanket on Etsy because I could customize and pick out the print that I wanted and some of the different things that were on it. You can
make it just for
and you could do that on Etsy. You can do it on Amazon. And it just had different things on there that he could grab onto and hold, and different textures. And we had that on his lap all the time, just to give him something that made him feel secure. Sometimes when he was being changed in the bed, especially in the beginning, until we figured out this fidget blanket thing, we would give him stress balls and he would squeeze those and hold on to those, because initially he was holding on to our hands and he was really squeezing our hands to the point where it hurt. So we got him those little stress balls, and which were very helpful too. So that's something to consider also. The fidget blankets, something to be in their hands all the time. And you'd be surprised how all of a sudden it just calms them if they are dealing with stress or anxiety or restlessness.
Similar to that, one thing that we did for Aunt Kathy is we filled some Easter eggs with rice and made little egg rattles. And she loved
Oh, I love
the
that.
sensory feedback of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Matthew, how tall was Matthew?
Matthew was about 5'4", 5'5", maybe.
Did you have trouble with things like him being tall enough to get into things? And was that ever an issue for him?
It really wasn't. Not with the equipment and the things that we dealt with. I mean, we did have to go through multiple wheelchairs to get one that fit him the best. But I know Kathy was so small that you did have some, right? You had some challenges with that. So we were blessed. We really didn't.
So one thing, if anyone out there also has a very petite loved one, Kathy was at her healthiest in her adult life. She was 4'6", and she shrunk. She shrunk as she got older. I don't know what she was towards the end of her life, but at her peak, she was 4'6". And that meant that not only did equipment not really work or fit her, but even sitting on the sofa or sitting on chairs or sitting on the toilet, none of that was easy for her because her feet would dangle. And so another thing that was a total lifesaver for us were these footstools that we bought. So I had two different kind, and they both worked really well. One was a set of 3 stackable footstools. So you could take them apart and make them 3 platforms, or you could put them together and make them a taller stool. And I had 2 sets of those. I had one underneath the sofa, and I had one underneath the chair in our living room. And that way she could, wherever she was, she could have those underneath her feet. Because I don't know if you've ever sat when your feet don't hit the ground, but it does not feel good. It does not feel relaxing, and it doesn't feel safe, and it doesn't feel secure. The other thing that I got that served the same purpose were yoga blocks.
Oh.
And I had 3 of those in the bathroom because they were waterproof and I could wash them and rinse them. Because again, when she got on the toilet, her feet didn't touch the floor. And the first thing I bought was one of those squatty potties. I tried that, and they were so thin that they didn't really, her feet kept moving around and would get off of them and whatever. They were also kind of high. So I found that these yoga blocks worked better. And besides that, because she was so short, sometimes I would even need to put one behind her back in the toilet.
But would you stack the yoga blocks and then for her feet?
Yeah, I would stack them for her feet. And then sometimes, depending on how she sat down on the toilet, because she really was so small, I would wedge one behind her butt, so that she could lean back, and I actually think it felt really good for her. So surprisingly, those were probably the most used piece of equipment in my house while Kathy was there. Did you have a plan for how to get Matthew out of your house when he was not mobile anymore?
In case of an emergency?
Yeah, or I guess, did you stopped having appointments?
Yeah, so we didn't, because we were on hospice, he didn't have to go out to the doctor or anything like that. And at one point we considered getting a van so he could come over to my house and doing all that. However, we realized the change would be too much for him and that might cause too much stress. So in case of emergency, though, we just knew
in case of emergency.
we just knew we would have, we had ramps, we had wheelchair ramps because we would take him outside of the house. And that was really, that was our plan. We would just use his Hoyer lift, get him into his chair and get him out on the ramp.
Yeah, that's right. You had a Hoyer lift.
Yeah, we had a Hoyer, which was, we couldn't have done this without a Hoyer lift.
Yeah, I was worried about getting Kathy out in an emergency. I knew I could do it. I would just pick her up, and if I had to, I'd throw us both down the stairs.
Right. Your adrenaline would kick in and you could do it, yeah.
If there's a fire, I'd rather have a broken leg than stay in the house. But anyway, I was planning for what do we do? What do we do if I've got to get her out, if I've got to take her to the hospital, if there's a fire, whatever. When she was no longer able to navigate the stairs, we tried lots of other things that, stair lift, blah, 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 too tall for her. At the very beginning, she was still able to go down on her bottom. So there were a couple times when we would make a choo-choo train and we'd both go down. I'd put her sort of piggyback on me and we'd both go down. The first time we did that, she laughed and thought it was hilarious. So I thought this was a great solution. The second time we did it, she told me it hurt her bottom and that she wasn't going to do it again. I know, I felt terrible. And there was a bruise on her tailbone. And so I was like, okay, well, that's not a solution for us anymore. As her disease progressed, the other thing that became a problem was that I couldn't get her to sit down on the floor. She didn't know how to do it, and I couldn't force her to. She was stiff as a board. She wouldn't bend her knees. And so, the EMTs were like, can she lay down on the ground and we can put her on a surfboard? And it's like, no, I can't, unless I tackle her, she's not getting down on the ground. So what I found, which was a great find, if anyone out there is petite, it was a beanbag chair. And it was a beanbag that was shaped like a chair and it had a back. And she was short enough that if I put it behind her or to the side of her, I could push her over and she would land on it and it would feel good to her. And she would land on it in the right way. And if I was by myself or if my sister was with me, we could each take the front and the back and sort of thump her down the stairs while she was riding it. Like she's surfing a concert, right? Anyway, we actually had to do that like once or twice there were a couple important things that she had to leave for, and it worked really well. So think about a beanbag if this is an issue that you're dealing with.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I also, some of this was quite a while ago for us. So I forget about some of these things. The fact that you said when she had trouble going down the stairs, I mean, this could just be a quick adaptation for people until it doesn't work anymore. Matthew would eventually have to sit and just thump his way down the stairs. I mean, he couldn't do the stairs anymore before, while he was still ambulatory. So he would just sit down and he would just take one step at a time and sit on his bottom and just scooch his way down the stairs. So just a quick, easy adaptation like that could be something that, if your loved one is
placeholder.
Right. I mean, until, like you said, if they have a bruise or it doesn't feel good or whatever, but it's not a bad idea and it gets the job done.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the fidget blanket, and there were a couple things that we did that we found that were really helpful for entertaining Aunt Kathy. And I don't know if this is something that you had to deal with Matthew, but Aunt Kathy, because she was so much older, her reference for nostalgia, I would say, was so much older, and it was hard to find all the TV shows that she remembered and loved, and things like that. So we found an app that showed all the old TV shows that she loved. It was called Tubi. And that plus an antenna to get PBS so she could listen to her Lawrence Welk once a week. I know, so cute.
I love it.
And a DVR, having that DVR function, because her mornings always started with Price is Right and Let's Make a Deal. But as the disease progressed, she would sleep later and later. But I didn't want her to miss out on her morning shows. And so I would record them. And when she woke up, it was time for Price is Right and Let's Make a Deal. And that's what she would eat her breakfast to. So I would say that Tubi app and an antenna and a DVR really made her quality of life so much better. And in that same vein, one last thing that helped her was Kathy knew what cell phones were, but as the dementia progressed, she wasn't really responding to video calls, FaceTime, or cell phones really were a little bit confusing to her. So I bought an old-fashioned phone that connected to my cell phone. And so when her brothers and sisters would call, I would hand her the receiver of the old-fashioned phone and she could hear them and talk to them through that. It was like a little speaker.
That is so really cool. Nice. I didn't even know that existed. That is really cool because you're right. A lot of the interfacing on the cell phone as the disease progresses, the FaceTime, it can become more confusing.
Yeah. And again, stressful and
yeah, that's a great idea. And to piggyback on that a little bit, so Matthew loved music and watching old home videos. So if And my parents, of course, still have like the original VCR that they had
right?
from, so having a VCR and a DVD player were really big for us because we would put in a lot of the old VCR tapes that he used to watch and some of his shows and family videos and then the DVDs. So that's a great idea. And that was another reminder of something we had. And then in his room, we had a little Amazon Echo or Dot or whatever those things are for his music, because he did have music that we always played. And I think
like Matthew's playlist.
Yeah, I mean, and then, but you brought up a good point because you said even though she was sleeping in, you still wanted her to have the routine of watching her show and having her this. And that goes back to the whole thing of consistency again. Everything that can be consistent and the expected routine will help them along in the journey. So that was, I'm glad you said that. Thanks for bringing that up. And I hope that some of these tips were helpful. It was fun. It was fun to go back and kind of reminisce on some of the tricks and tips. And I guess I would say some of the bloopers even that came along with, trying these things out and figuring out what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I hope these can help along the way with some of our listeners out there and their loved ones. And
I don't know about you, Kristin, but I have a whole other list. So we might want to do a second episode one day.
Yeah, for sure.
There are tons.
Yeah, I've got some more.
Yeah, tons of supplies and things that I jerry-rigged, or I'm sure you did too, that made life so much easier.
Yeah, for sure. And all it takes sometimes is just one little trick that you and that you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a game changer. I'm so glad that we figured this out finally. So hopefully these are helpful and will be good along the way for people. It was fun chatting with you, Molly.
Yeah, you too.